We're on Daf Tes Hamid Beis, third line. Ella Amar Rav Papa. The Gemara had rejected the distinction between Nidche Mipnei Atuma and Nidche Mipnei Dover Acher, like the case of Chagigah. And now the Gemara is going to answer this question that we asked from the two statements of Rabbi Yochanan, the Rabbi Yochanan ben Nazir, in a different way. Ela Amar Rav Papa. Kasav Rabbi Yochanan, Laila Eino Mechusar Zman. When we get to the nighttime, and we're talking about the night after the seventh, because the Nazir became tummy, and then he counted 7 days of Tara, going into the eighth, and he has to bring his carbon. But again, there's no carbon at night, but it's already Higia Zman Hakrova. As far as the Chiyuv Hakrova of the Karbanos, he's already reached that night. He's already Chayav. So that's not called Mechusar Zman. And he really should be makriv his carbon at that time, just that there's no avodas karbanos at night. The Beis Hamikdash, so to speak, is closed for business. And therefore there's no avodah ksheira b'layla. But when it comes to the night of Shmini, as far as the Nazir is concerned, he's chayiv already a chiyuv gomer to bring his karbanos. The gavra is chayiv. The kiyum is impossible. So since the gavra is roy and he's already a bar chiyuva to bring his karbanos, therefore he has a chiyuv tashlumin. But in the case of a chiger who on the first day of Yontif was lame, Rahman al-Islan, he was not a bar chiyuv at all. The chovas Karban Chagigah did not emerge whatsoever. Therefore, he's not nischayiv in tashlumin when he becomes healthy on the on the next day. So it means that Chagigah is a pure gavra, means hafkas hachiyuv, whereas Laila is chayiv, but there's no kiyuv. Now, to introduce the next Gemara about Ziva, a person who sees a re'iyah of Ziva, after one time that he sees the re'iyah, he's tameh like a balkari. On that very day, he's tovel, and he's tar b'hariv shemesh. If he sees two re'iyos on two consecutive days, then he's tameh b'tumah zav. He's metameh b'mishkav u'b'moshav hanogeh b'mishkavo b'moshavo nitma. And then when he stops flowing this ziva, he needs to count seven yomim nikiyim that don't have any ziva. And after the 7 zayin nikiyim, he can be tovel, and he becomes tar in the evening. If he sees 3 re'iyos on 3 consecutive days, then he's chayav a carbon. Now, after he counts, and he was tovel on the 7th day, then tomorrow, the next day, on Yom Shmini, he brings shtei torim, o shnei b'nei yona, 1 for a chatas, 1 for an olah. Now, in order for these 3 re'iyos to integrate, to generate a chiv carbon, you need that there shouldn't be any hefsek of 1 full day between one re'iyah and the next. Now the Gemara brings Rabbi Yochanan with regard to his Zav who saw 3 re'iyos, he was chayiv carbon, and then he became tameh a second time around. Umi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hachi. Did Rabbi Yochanan actually say that Laila is not considered mechusar zman? The gavra is a bar chiyuva. Amar Rabbi Yochanan said that if after the zav counts 7 nikiyim, kim mishpato, and he was tobel and hariv shemsho, and he became tar, now he saw another re'iyas ziva b'layla on the night between the 7th and the 8th. That means or lishmini Ushtayim, and then he sees another 2 re'iyos of Ziva Bayom on the very next day. So he saw Balayla or Lishmini, and he saw B'Yom HaShmini. Is Rabbi Yochanan Paskins in this case, maybe when he becomes Torah a second time around, he's got to bring an additional carbon for these re'iyos, in addition to the carbon that he brings for his original Tumah Rishona. And even though the first re'iyah that led to his status as a Zav was a re'iyah b'layla, and at that point there was not Higia Zman HaKarbon because there's no carbon. on that night, on any night. So therefore, Adayin lo higia zman hakrovas hakarbon shel Tumah Rishona. Because again, it's after the 7th, going into the 8th. And if he didn't leave the Tumah Rishona domain and enter into the Zman HaKrava domain, then he doesn't begin the Zman Tumah Shtiyah, as far as Karban is concerned. But nevertheless, since the second Riyah and the third Riyos, which generate the shame Tumas Zav, we're all during the day, then it's already considered Zman Aroy Lavas Karban al Tumas Rishona. And now he becomes what emerges as a new Chiv Karban, additional Chiv Karban on the Tumah Shniyah. So that's in the case where he saw a Re'iyah Balayla and 2 consecutive Re'iyahs Bayom. However, what if he sees Shtayim Balayla V'achas Bayom? He sees 2 Re'iyahs at night and only 1/3 Re'iyah by day. Rabbi Yochanan says, Eino Mevi. He doesn't bring another Karban for his second Tumah, because even the Re'iyah Shniyah, which gives him a din of Zav, was Balayla, in this case of Shtayim Balayla V'achas Bayom. So Lo Higia Zman Avos Karban al Tumas Rishona. V'lo Hischil Zman Tumah Shniyah Linyan Karban. He hasn't started yet his Tumah Shniyah. And it's basically like a case of Tumah Ziva, Achas Arucha, one long continuous Tumah Ziva, and therefore he's not obligated in a Karban Sheni. But if he's out the night to Kasar Rabbi Yochanan Laila, Eina Mechus Zman, which means that the night going into Shmini is like the day of Shmini as far as Karban is concerned, is then Yotza Kfar Mechlal Tumas Rishona L'Zman HaKrava. And therefore the din should be, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that Afilu Shtayim Balayla V'achas Bayom, maybe. Why does it have to be that if he saw Achas Balayla Shtayim Bayom, maybe, even if he saw Shtayim Balayla V'achas Bayom, and basically now he has all 3 Re'iyos Balayla, is maybe he should bring a Karban on the Tumah Shniyah, because all his Re'iyos were in the Zman of Havas Karban on Tumas Rishona. He's already emerged as a full-fledged Bar Chiyuva as generated by the Tumas Rishona. And now he has a new Tumah, altogether Tumah Chadasha, as far as Karban is concerned. And therefore we must conclude that Rabbi Yochanan holds a Lailas Mechus Zman, and the night going into Shmini is before the moment of Higia Zman HaKrava Shel Karban Rishon. And therefore, since he saw Shtayim Balayla, it's like one long Ziva Arucha, and he's not Chayv Karban Nosaf, an additional Karban, unless he sees at least 2 Re'iyos Bayom. So why is it with regard to Nazir, if he becomes Tameh on second round, on the night going into Shmini? Rabbi Yochanan says he has to bring Tashlume Karban on the Tumas Rishona, even though he's not yet Roy Lahakriv Karbano, but he's not called B'chus Zman. In other words, there's a Chiv Karban even when it's not Roy B'chil Zman Chiv to bring the Karban. So therefore we have to go back to that question, why is it that with regard to Chiv Ger B'Yom Rishon, the Gemara says according to Rabbi Yochanan, he's not Chayiv in Tashlumin, and the Gemara answers, Ki Kamar Rabbi Yochanan Divrei Omer Laila B'chus Zman. Rabbi Yochanan, when he said that if you see 2 Re'iyos Balayla and Achas B'Yom, he doesn't bring a second Karban, that was reflective of the opinion that Laila is considered Mechus Zman. So the night going into the 8th is not yet, the Chiv Karban has not yet emerged. And therefore he only brings Achas. Rabbi Yochanan himself holds that Laila is Eino Mechus Zman. And therefore, even if he saw 2 re'iyos or 3 re'iyos b'layla, he's chayiv a korban nosaf. He has to bring an additional korban on this second tumah. And therefore, our original teretz that we mentioned earlier on the previous Omud is now back in place. And the reason a Nazir shenitma b'leil shmini is chayiv shtayim is because chalal of chovas hakrobas halayla. Toyeroy odds. And therefore, he's chayiv in tashlumin. But in a case where it's eino roy bizman tchilos chiyuvo, then he's not mischayiv in tashlumin, and therefore there's no longer a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan from the halach of Chiger b'yom rishon. The Gemara asks L'divrei Omer, according to that man who holds that Laila is b'chus zman, is pshita. Certainly, he's not chayiv a second korban because he never left the tumas rishona as far as korban is concerned. So why did Rabbi Yochanan feel compelled to tell us this? And as if he's saying he's expressing his own opinion al das atzmo. All right, that we can accept. And he's coming to be mechadish that he himself holds, Rabbi Yochanan, that Laila is mechus zman. But if we're going to say that Laila mechus zman is only according to one man diyoma, so what's the chiddush in this halacha? So the Gemara says, you know what? Even in the case where he saw 2 re'iyos b'layla and achas b'yom, we don't need to be mechadesh that according to that man diyomar who holds Laila b'chus zman, he's not mischayev a korbanos. But the first half of Rabbi Yochanan's statement, namely shtayim bayom v'achas b'layla, that's where the chiddush lies. He saw 2 re'iyos bayom and 1 b'layla, and he brings a korban in addition to his tumaso rishona for tumas hashniya. And that's itzrichle. That's a chiddush that we need to hear. To Salkadak, I mean, I would have thought that the Askafta, the Rav Shisha, grade Rav Idi, that based on the svara of the Kasha of Rav Shisha, who asked on Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef had said, not here, but in Krisus, that the reason why if a person sees at night and shtayim bayom, he brings a korban, because basically every zav, the re'ir rishona, which he sees, that's not going to generate tumah kizav. Then he has the status of balkari. And even though when he sees a second time around, whether it's once or twice, we can integrate the Ria Rishona with them for a Tumah Zav, that's because the Re'ios Achronos are Kovos with Tumas Zav. They clinch the Tumah Zav. And the same din will apply when he has the first Ria Malayla. And even though at that moment in time, he's not chayiv a korban sheni, but nevertheless, since he sees 2 re'iyos, the last 2 re'iyos b'yom, it's mitztaref imoyim l'tuma zav u'lechiv korban. And Rav Shisha had raised the following objection. What's the proof from Riyazav? In every case of a Zav, when he sees the first Riyah Rishona, that's always at his man, that's Roy Lechiv Karma. He's not going to be Tomei, Zov, because he only had 1 Re'iyah. And therefore, that Re'iyah could be integrated later on to Mechayev him a Karma. But in a situation where he saw the first Riyah on the night of the 8th, that's not his man royal karma for the karma sheni. So going according to that man, the Omer who holds Laila is Mechusar's man. And he hasn't yet left his man of Hakravas Karma on his original tumah. Ashmalan Kid Rabbi Yosef. And that's where Rabbi Yochanan wants to teach me the Svar of Rabbi Yosef, that even though we can integrate the first Riyah to the other Riyos, and it's going to be mitzaref to be mechayiv v'kor. We learned in our Mishnah back on Daf Samad Aleph that over a regel v'lo chag, he hasn't yet brought his karma chagigah during the entire course of the regel. Eino chay bach reyusa. Al zeh nemar me'uvas lo yuchal liskon v'chisaron lo yuchal li'monos. He can't be mashlim the chisaron of the mitzvah, the karma chagigah. Amalei bar hehe lehilel. Hi lihimanos. Why does it say the word lihimanos with regard to the chisaron? Chisaron lo yuchal lihimanos. He should have said chisaron lo yuchal, not lihimanos, but lihimal os biboile. And it sounds like if a person omits a mitzvah, one single mitzvah, he will not be able to memale, to fulfill and replace that chisaron chachisa. Elo, zeh sheminu chaverov l'dvar mitzvah. The pasuk is teaching us about someone whose friends told him that he should come along with them, be included in the minyan, as far as the need for a certain mitzvah. Vehulo nimna imahem. He decided not to join them. And he omitted that mitzvah for himself. He left it out. And with regard to this chisaron, the pasuk says, "Lo yuchal lihimanos." He won't be able to join them and be counted amongst them as part of the minyan of Osei mitzvah, because the mitzvah was done by them. Tanya nami hachi, and that's how we learned in a brisa, like this interpretation bar hihi. Uvas lo yuchal liskon zeh shebitel kriyat shma shel shachris o kriyat shma shel arvis. O shebitel tefillah shel shachris o tefillah shel arvis, and over zmanom and hifsid mitzvasam. Bechesron lo yuchal limanos. What is that part of the pasuk referring to? Zeh shenimnu chaverov l'dvar mitzvah v'hu lo nimna imahem. So his chaverim got together and they were ready to do the mitzvah, but he does not want to join them. So Muvas Lo Yuchal Liskon is addressing the case of someone who didn't pray, he lost Palklal, and he completely forfeits the mitzvah of tefillah. Isar Lo Yuchal Limna Lihimanos. That's addressing the case of someone who didn't have the minyan, but tzibur, and he does achieve the mitzvah of tefillah. Amalei bar hehe lehilel. We started with Bar Hey to Hillel, and now we're going to continue that dialogue of these personalities. At the end of Tanakh, when Malachi gives his nevuah about the future of days, V'shavtem ureisem vein tzadik l'rosha vein oved Elohim asher lo avada. We should ask the following question: Hainu tzadik, hainu oved Elohim, hainu rosha, hainu asher lo avada. So why does the pasuk have to repeat itself? You started with Tzaddik and Rasha, and then you go on to Oved Elohim Asher Lo Avada. They're all synonymous. Amalei, so Hillel responded that they're not saying the same thing again. Rather, the first part of the pasuk, when it distinguishes between a Tzaddik and a Rasha, that's one thing. But the end of the pasuk is not differentiating and contrasting a Tzaddik and a Rasha, but rather Avado and the law avodah, and Shavayu, both of them are tzaddikim gemurim. But Eino Doma Hashona Pirko Mea Pa'amim LaShona Pirko Mea the Echad. So if he adds that 101, he's called an Oved Elokim. The person who reviewed his lesson 100 times is Asher Lo Avod. See, even though they're both tzaddikim and they reviewed their lessons so many times, but their avoda is not the same. There's a fundamental difference, a gap between them. Amalei, Barhei says to Hillel, Mishum chad zimna kari le lo avodo, because he left out that 101, he only reviewed his lessons 100 times. He gets to be categorized as Asher Lo Avodo. Amalei, yes, that's true. Why? Say Lamad, we're going to derive from something out there in society how crucial that last time is, and what a fundamental difference there is. And that's Mishuk Shel Chamorim, which is the place where they sell or they rent donkeys to carry as a beast of burden. Asara Parsi Bezuzah. In order to transport a burden on a chamor for 10 parsos, they demand a price of 1 zuz. But chad aser parsi, if you're paying for him to be molech, to be 1 chamor for asar parsios, is yidreshu mimenu schar shel shnei zuzim. They're going to demand for that a payment of 2 zuzim. We see that for 1 parsa, they add much more on that which is standard. You're going to have to pay a full zuz, even though in regular rental for animals, it's eser parsos zuz. So therefore, the person who reviews his lesson 101st time, then his avodah is not at all similar to the one who reviews it only 100 times.
You should look up a little. Looking down.
Amalei Elio lebar hehe. V'yesh omrim Amalei Elio Rabbi Elio's. My dichsiv, what does the Pasuk Yeshaya mean in the Tochach of Yeshaya regarding the nevuah of Golus Bavel? It says, "V'hine tzrafticha v'lo v'chesed, becharticha bechur oni." And Hashem here is being mitzaref Am Yisrael in order to cleanse them of their sins, not with the Eish of Gehenna, as we do in the case of Kesef, when we want to refine the natural silver and put it through a heating process to remove all the sigim, all the impurities. Asher bocha litzorach kach eskur ha'oni b'tshvil litzarfa bo. V'lav in shechoza kodesh bocha kol midos tovos b'shvil litein liYisrael. V'lo motza midaruya dayo li nosen lem ela nius. Omer Shmuel v'tema Rav Yosef Hainu damri inchi ya ani yusa liyehudoi ki barza sumka Lesusia chivara. Poverty is a good thing for the Jews, as it is good for a ritzua aduma, a red strap for a white horse. And as a result of the red, the color red, it's clear it's got a very sharp a very sharp color. And it's Nikar biyotzer tzivo halavon vayofil. Rab Shimon ben Asi Omer, Ezu me'uvas lo yuchal litzkon tabal ha'erva v'holit min ha'mamzer shehevi psuli Yisrael v'Yisrael v'yesh zikar l'maseu v'yein avonoso nimchak al yidei tshuva. And the Gemara now wants to clarify, does mu'uvas apply in the case of a Vlad Mamzer, of Holid, if he gave birth to a Mamzer, because he was Bala Erva in, then it's mu'uvas lo yuchal liskon. Of a low Holid, if a Mamzer was not born to that illegitimate relationship, low, he's not included under this category of muvas. But Sani, we learned to the Bryce of Shimon ben Asi Omer Gonev Adam. Efshar sheyachzir gnevo b'yisakin. He can fix up and rectify his sin. Gozel Adam. What does that mean? He stole a person. He leaves this world without tshuva because he did an action which has no takana. This woman will not be allowed to live with her husband ever. Rav Shimon Yochai Omer, Ein Adam Omer Bakru. Bakru means Badku. Gamal. Check out a Gamal for a karma. Or Bakru Chazir as a karma. Because even if these animals do not have mumin, they are still disqualified by the very nature of their creation. El Bakru Tle. Check out a tle to see if it has mumin, and hopefully it will not, and if it's kosher karma. And this is all a mashal. It's a homily, a metaphor. That something which is kosher and good from its very get-go, from the get-go, mitchiloso, you could talk about a kilkul umu. But something that was possible from its beginning, from its labor as it emerged, it doesn't have a kilkul. And therefore, we have to interpret this Ezu Maves Hamucha Hamur L'Posel. Zet Hamid Chacham Shepiyush Minat Torah. He was Tov Mitchila. He was learning Torah. And then he had a kilkul, he had a fall, and he was Parish Minat Torah. But a person who's Baal Eishasish, that's not considered that Mitchila was good. Maybe he tried to avoid Avera, but you can't say in a positive sense, Asay Tov. And the Brisa adds now, with regard to a Talmud Chacham Shapirech, Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish, Omar Kol Talmud Chacham Shapirech ben HaTorah, Olav HaKosav Omer, Pasuk in Mishlei, Kitzipar, no Dedes Min, kina, like the bird that scuttles away from its nest. Kain ish noded mimkomo, a Talmid Chacham who is noded milimudo. The Omer, and furthermore about a Talmid Chacham who's Parish Min Torah, he says, Ma motzu avosechem bi avel ki rachaku me'alai. At the beginning of Sefer Yirmiyah, someone who was carved mitchila through his limud Torah, and he lends himself to the richuk, to the language of richuk. So now we have a kasha because at the beginning of the brisa, Reb Shimon ben Asya says that Abal Eishes is Harei B'Chlal Muva Lo Yuchal Liskan. He said Etzem Biyasa, and he generates an Isser on Haba. So we don't need Vlad Mamzer. And here from our mission, it seems it's only because of the Vlad is Mamzer that we include him on the Muvas Yolichos Liskan. Lo Kasha. And now in Mishnah, Rav Shimon ben Asya says, Habala Ereva, he becomes Mavas Lo Yuchal Liskon. And that's only because he had a mamzer. Is that talking about a case of Achoso Pnuya? He had a relationship, an erva with his own sister. So he doesn't generate an Easter because of his bia. And therefore, if the Vlad is a mamzer, from this bia, it's included on the Ma'uvas Lo Yuchal Liskan. But if there was no conception, then no. But here the brisa where Reb Shimon ben Asya formulates the rule that a Baal Erev is concluded Mavas because of that bia, then it's talking about Eishes Ish, Shalasal Baila. Ivois Ema, Ha ve'ha be'Eishes Ish. Both the Mishnah and the Brisa are talking about Eishes Ish, below Kasha. Can the Mishnah that he's not included on the Ma'avas Lo Yuchal Liskan unless he was moled from this bia. And now we turn to Daf Yud Amud Aleph. The onus. So we're talking about a case of rape, and therefore she's not, unless she's married to a kohen, she's not asura l'bayla, because the din is ein isha neseres l'bayla ad she boil beratzon, but not be'onus. And therefore the whole ma'uva shalochin niskan depends upon the vlad being a mamzer, but here in the brisa, we're talking about a case where we had a relationship with Raton. And therefore, he's considered Ma'avis Lo Yuchal Liskan, even if there was no mamzer born, by virtue of the fact that she becomes a Surah Baila. If you want, I can give you another answer. Havaha, whether it's the Mishnah or the Brisa, it's talking about a case of onus. Below Kasha. Kan, here in the Brisa, we're talking about an Ashes Kohen. And therefore she's Asura Bailali Olam. And even if she had a bia be'ones. But Khan, in the Mishnah, we're talking about an Ashes each of a Yisrael. She's married to Yisrael. So she's not Asura Olam in a case of ones, only in a case of Rata. And that's not considered Ma'uvas Lo Yuchal Liskan, because there's no Isra in a case of Ones, Al Baila Shehu Yisrael, Ella, it's Ella Im Holid Mams. Then we get to Ma'uvas Lo Yuchal Liskan. Now the Gemara earlier on Daf Tes Amud Aleph had brought the words of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai that Ma'uvas Lo Yuchal Liskan is a Talmid Chacham which Poreish Min Torah. And the Gemara now is going to interpret a pasuk. Nemar, it says in the Torah, in Sefer Zechariah, V'la yotze v'la ba ein shalom. Amar Rav, kevin sheyotze adam midvar halacha lidvar mikra. So let's say he finishes his Asek and a Mishnah. Now he goes and he studies Mikros. Shuvein lo shalom. Why? Because eino ba lidei hora brura. She'ein hora la'alocha milimud hamikra. She'amishnah hiya mefareshes stimas hamikros. L'shmuel Amar. Zeh poresh mi Talmud leMishnah. He's a Talmud and he's dedicating his energies, his chakiros, his havana to try to understand Tanei mitzvahs, the svaras behind the mitzvahs. And this pasuk is teaching me that if he's osek b'kriyas hamishnayis and he's not being medagdik in the svaros, then ein lo shalom b'dvar hora, because there's no true ruling in hora, verdict, based on the learning of a Mishnah, because the Mishnah sometimes cannot be understood on its own. You need Shas to interpret it. And only through the limit of Shas is it possible to be motzi halacha and derive conclusions la halacha with rulings. You would have to have the limit of Shas. Rabbi Yochanan Amar afilu mishas l'shas. Even if he's poresh from Shas Yerushalmi, which is apparently easier to understand, and therefore he joins Shas Bavli, his limud is so deep, and the tamim that he gives, as far as that he gives, sometimes they're not understood the maximum to which they should be understood. And therefore, kosher mimenu dvar halacha. It's very difficult to uproot and remove that dvar halacha. This leads us to the Mishnah here on the top of Daf Yutes Amud. Thank you very much, and Shabbat Shalom.